Welcome, friends and fellow horse fiends. You've landed on Come Ride With Me, a podcast dedicated to helping you find harmony, joy, and success in your riding. I'm your host, Anna Fox of Equus Enlightened. This pod isn't about training your horse, but about training you to be the best partner for your horse. Listen to find out how I use my intention to direct my ride. You'll hear how I decide what to focus on, what to say yes to, and when to redirect my horse. You'll see how not getting frustrated or overwhelmed is the easiest path to sanity and harmony. So, what are you waiting for? Come ride with me. Hey there, fellow horse fiends. Can you believe that last episode was number 20? I don't know why, but even numbers always feel like a milestone, and I didn't even realize it until I was editing the episode. So luckily, I did get to celebrate by posting it oceanfront because I was at a conference with my husband. So I'm going to take that win and being beachfront as my celebration for my 20th episode. Thank you guys for hanging out and listening to me babble on and listen to me ride. I have had some great feedback so far. I hope you guys will keep sharing, keep liking, rate, review if you can. It really helps other people find the pod. And this week, I just want to know, how did you do taking your hands away? Like whether you decided to try just bitless, bridleless, totally reinless. What happened? How did you feel? Did you die? I'm assuming not if you're listening to this. Or did you just feel like you might a few times? Did it cause any emotional junk to come up for you? Did you acknowledge that junk when it came up? Because taking away the reins or the bit is essentially taking away our feeling of a sense of control. Right? Because we're human and we think that we can control everything with our hands. So it's difficult from a thinking perspective to let go, more so than from a practical perspective. The horses don't really need our hands to communicate. They'd probably actually rather we didn't use our hands to communicate. But for humans, it's a feeling of safety and comfort and control. This topic really plays into most of my dressage pet peeves. That's why I think I'm so passionate about it. This week, I thought I would go over some of my dressage pet peeves with you guys, especially in light of everything that's been in the media recently. Horses being mistreated, rougher training techniques, things like that. And we all know that those things have been around forever, or at least as long as I have been alive. I was exposed to some of those things growing up. But as I learned that there were other ways, there were better ways to communicate with horses, it changed my horsemanship. And I really think there's a difference between outright abuse and people who are doing things because they think that that's the way to get to where they want to go, or they think that's the way they need to communicate with the horse. We have to remember that not everybody is in the same place in their journey with horses, in their journey with life. Like, there are so many factors. And I think about it, for me, also working in public safety and seeing the different types of humanity, right? And the different ways that people treat each other. I feel like it's very interesting to me when I see someone just really go off on a social media post where there's some rough training, something that borders on horse abuse, things like that. And basically what they do is berate the person, right? They abuse that person. Well, in my mind, that's not fixing the situation. Humans do terrible things to each other all the time. So it is not surprising that they would also do the same things to horses or any other animal, right? And it's not a pretty subject to talk about. But what I really want people to get out of it is that having some restraint, having some ability to look back on your own horse experiences, having some empathy for humans that are involved, because it's not always just the human that is doing the abuse, right? That may not be their horse. It may be somebody else's horse. There may be a rider who is involved if it's a trainer. So I always ask people, and I actually published this in my local GMO's newsletter recently, just like we think of with the horses, practice the pause, right? Pause before you make a comment. Pause before you make a judgment. And sometimes you don't really need to say anything. Just knowing that that's maybe not somebody that you want to learn from or somebody that you want to support in a financial way is enough, right? And then we can move on. I didn't really anticipate that as being one of my dressage pet peeves, but it actually is right now with the dressage community. Like, let's have a little grace. Don't support bad things, but you don't need to make yourself look bad by causing more abuse to another human in the way that you speak out against it. Now, on to my real dressage pet peeves. And some of these are because I think we have lost some of these principles in dressage, is why we get these deplorable training techniques. Number one, isn't it about self-carriage? Isn't that like the little top of the pyramid? Collection is self-carriage. And if we think about the pyramid, and I talked about this in one of the other episodes, but you want to think about the pyramid as a plan for each ride. You want to think about that as a training plan for each day. So the things at the bottom, the bigger blocks, you do more of those. And then you do a little bit of the things at the top. So even a young horse or a horse that has never learned collection before will do a little bit of collection. Will learn a little bit of self-carriage each time I work with that horse. And self-carriage is something, could be something as simple as standing in the cross ties, or standing tied, or ground tying, or just being able to stand with you on their back. Self-carriage, in its very basic form, is just the horse being able to carry themselves, to be emotionally responsible for themselves in that moment, and to be able to deal with whatever is happening around them. And if you're having to micromanage a horse standing still, there's something in that horse's nervous system that is not functioning in a space to allow it to have self-carriage. So, and this doesn't necessarily mean that a horse who, let's say, is very anxious and in a heightened state can't be self-carrying, because of course they could be. But then if that is the case, you've lost the bottom of the pyramid, right? And so if we're thinking about it from a dressage training perspective, or just a training perspective in general, because I think the training pyramid is good for training any type of horse, right? So if they get into that heightened state, and yes, they're carrying themselves wherever, but they've lost the relaxation, then we need to go back and we need to figure out how to put that relaxation back in there. I sit on so many horses that have been trained to, I would say, mid-level dressage, third, fourth level, and they don't self-carry. They want you to hold them, or they've been trained to be held. I don't understand where that theory comes from, because again, it's not self-carriage. And if you're teaching the horses from the lower levels that you're going to hold them, you're basically micromanaging. And the higher up the levels you get, the more micromanaging you have to do, and the harder it gets. And I know, because I came from a little bit of that thinking, because I didn't know any better. Nobody really explained it to me very well for a while when I first got into eventing and was trying to learn more dressage. That, if I teach the horse to do these things on their own, then they have the self-carriage. They have the responsibility to be able to do these things. And as they get more training, their levels progress, the more they should be able to carry themselves. And it should also be about lightness. Well, if you are holding a big, strong horse together, there is nothing light about that. Also, a lot of these horses take a lot of leg. Like, you hear instructors all the time, push, push, push. Well, there's nothing light about that either, right? The horse should be able to maintain its own freely forward gait without the push, push, push. Because again, that's not lightness. Shouldn't it be about suppleness? Isn't that the bottom of the training pyramid? So many of these horses that I sit on, if I put my inside leg on them, all they do is sort of run out the circle, right? They just scoot away from that inside leg. But I may need them to actually bend the rib cage a little. Or I may put my inside leg back because I need them to move the haunches over. Or I may move it forward because I need them to move the shoulder a little bit. But if they're only taught to run off the inside leg into the outside rein and be held there, they're not supple. Now, by doing a lot of sort of moving of their neck sometimes, and moving the bit back and forth in the horse's mouth, people sometimes think that that is suppleness. They can waggle their neck so they're supple. That's not what that term in relation to dressage means. Suppleness comes from the back. It comes from responsiveness to the aids. It comes from that sense of lightness. And then shouldn't it also be about ease? Shouldn't this be easy? I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in a former episode as well. I read it in an article many years ago, probably in a USDF magazine. And it was a quote by Robert Dover. They were interviewing him. And what I can remember of it was that he said, it shouldn't be hard. Talking about riding Grand Prix dressage, it shouldn't be hard. You should be able to sit up there and eat a chocolate bar. So shouldn't it be about ease? Shouldn't it get easier as we go up the levels? Yes, the movements get more complicated, but our horses should have more ease. They should have more self-carriage. They should be lighter. They should be more supple. They should be happier. And all of that should create a sense of ease. The same is also true for the riders. So the riders need to be able to self-carry. Your balance needs to be so good that you don't need your reins. Because if you need your reins to balance, you're abusing your horse's mouth. And then it's never going to be about lightness. Because the harder things get, the bigger your horse moves, the more complicated the movements, the more you're going to feel the need to hold yourself in and balance on those reins. So as riders, we need to be light as well. We need to be supple. We need to be able to move our bodies. We need to be able to turn our torsos. We need to be able to lift a shoulder, lift a hip, move a leg back, move a leg forward, tweak a wrist, have some piano fingers. We need to have the suppleness in our physical bodies. We also need to have the suppleness in our minds to regulate our own nervous systems. And through that, we can also teach our horses to have a supple mind and a supple nervous system. And then that also leads to a sense of ease. It gives the horse a sense of ease in the way they're doing, in the way they're going to be treated by their human. Gives them a sense of ease that all is okay in the world. And then this can also give the human that same level of confidence. The trick is, oftentimes, the human needs to have these things solidified in their own selves to bring it into the horse's world. It's not really fair for us to expect our horses to have self-carriage, to be light, to be supple, to go with ease when we are going around with a bunch of mental baggage. We can't keep ourselves on the horse without holding on to their mouths. We're not light with our aids. We're not very supple in the saddle. And we don't think anything is easy. We think every day should be hard. And it doesn't matter if we bring that mentality from work or from home, or if we just think that riding should be hard. Riding and being with your horse should never be hard. So if you bring that mentality into the barn, if you bring that mentality to your horse, start to notice that. Start to notice it and think, how can I bring in some ease? How can I be more supple? Not just in my physical body, in my mind as well. How could I be lighter? In my mind and also with my aids. How can I have better self-carriage? And not just when I'm riding my horse, when I'm around my horse. I was talking to a student yesterday who was telling me about doing some liberty work with her horse and remembering how when she first started doing it, she had this really big fear. And I don't even really want to say that it's a fear as much as an angst about the horse running off. And that being a sign of rejection, right? And so she needed to notice that, right? She noticed that was a feeling that came up. And that would make her frustrated. When she sat with that feeling for a minute and then realized that the horse is just being playful now, and could she go back and engage with the horse again, and might the horse come back to her? That creates a different dynamic. That creates some self-carriage in the human. Whereas putting that fear of rejection or that angst about rejection onto your horse, don't leave me, because it's going to make me feel bad, and then I'm going to be frustrated about it, and I might get angry. Those emotions are your responsibility, not your horse's. So putting that onto your horse is not self-carriage. Same thing goes for your horse. If your horse is having a lot of emotional baggage, if they are not able to regulate their nervous system very well, for whatever reason, in whatever moment, they need some help to figure out why, what's the problem, how can we work through this, and get to a place of self-carriage in the moment. I believe that it's a little bit more of our responsibility to help our horses in that situation, because we want them to be with us. We want them to be in our domestic world, and they don't ask for that. So we have more responsibility towards our horses than our horses have towards us, in my opinion, because we ask them to live with us, do the things that we want to do, that often have nothing to do with what horses actually want, need, etc. So how do we foster those qualities in ourselves and in our horses? With our horses, you start very basic self-carriage in little mini bits. Just start noticing what things could your horse have some more self-carriage in. Like, could they stand better when you're not on them? Like, could they ground tie? When you get on them, when you halt, can they stand? Can they maintain a decent posture, at least for a few seconds, and stand there? And then relax and not have to move about. Can you ask them for a downward transition without needing to support them through your reins? Same thing with an upward transition. Can they carry themselves up without you having to use the rein? How do you as a human have better self-carriage? Think about the energy that you're bringing with you to your horse. Are you bringing a sense of ease and lightness with you? Or are you bringing all your extra baggage from life with you? Do you work on your own balance, your own position, your own strength, your own endurance? Do you work on those things when you're riding without interfering with your horse? And then do you also work on them when you're not riding? Do you think about those things when you're at home, when you're not at the barn? That is us bringing some self-carriage and respect to our horses. How do we bring in lightness? Basically the same ways we just talked about with self-carriage. All of that's going to bring in more lightness. But also when you think about riding, we talked about this in the Phases of the AIDS Freely Forward episode. Imagine what the most minimal aid, I always go with intention, my thought to do something. That's when I want my horse, when they feel me thinking, I want them to go, is there something? What is there? That way you're thinking of the least amount that you could do to get your horse to do something. And you always start there. A lot of times we get so into a pattern, into a habit of, I have to kick my horse to go forward. Let's just say I get on and I got to kick him to go away from the mounting block. Well, every time you just kick and they go, that seems fine. Except now when you want to go to trot, you probably have to squeeze, kick a little harder. If you want to go to canter, that increases, right? So if you just thought, sat up, inhaled, thought, go forward, and your horse just went forward. Now when you want to go trot, maybe you have to close your legs a little. Maybe when you go canter, you have to give a little squeeze. And then you can refine even those aids down. But if you have to use a strong aid at an easy time or a slow speed time, you're going to have to use exponentially more each time you go faster or something gets harder. So you can bring lightness by learning how to think about what you want and getting your horse to respond to your intention. How do you bring in suppleness? Well, again, we want to talk about mental suppleness, mental flexibility. Sometimes that is hard for us as humans. We tend to be very busy in today's society, have so many things that we want to get done that our brains do not do well with change, or maybe my horse isn't in the mood today. Maybe I'm not in the mood today, but I'm just so robotic on my habit of going to the barn and doing XYZ that I do it anyway. Start loosening up your gray matter, right? Start giving your brain a little flexibility. Start working on your own suppleness. Also, work on your flexibility and your suppleness in the saddle. Can you move around, right? You should not be stiff. You should be relaxed. You should be happy. You should be joyful to be on top of this horse. Because it's a miracle that they let us ride them. If you do all of those things, you're going to bring in a lot of ease. But you can bring in your own ease by, again, using your mind, thinking about things in an easier way, making things more simple. A lot of times in dressage, we are making things way harder than they need to be. So breaking them down to their very simplest tasks. Also, not thinking that you need to always do so much. I believe that a lot of horses are overridden and overtrained just because our human need is to repeat, to do this, And sometimes we need to just get in there, get it done, and get out. And our horses will remember, and they will thank us for it, and they will offer us more next time. So as you're working with your horses in the next week, I want you to think about, how much self-carriage do either of you have? How much lightness are you working with? How much suppleness are you working with? Do you have a feeling of ease? And then if you really want to challenge yourself, you can take those 4 things and apply them to your outside of your horse life and go, maybe if my work life doesn't have ease, suppleness, lightness, and self-carriage, it's harder for me to bring those attributes into the barn. Or, oh, I notice I don't have these attributes when I'm at work or when I'm at home with my kids all day. So I have to work on developing these skills, developing these concepts in my brain so that when I get to the barn, I can use them. And usually what you'll start to notice is that you'll also start to do it in your everyday life, just because it gets easier. And I really do think that dressage should still be about those things: self-carriage, lightness, suppleness, ease. And it should be beautiful. And it should be fun. And you should be happy. Rather than being frustrated, frightened, tired, sore. All of the things I hear people tell me. All right, guys, thank you for hanging in with me on this episode. Remember that if you want to find out more, you can check out the links in the show notes. Also, you can hop on over, check out my Patreon page. You can join the community there. You can also check out some of the videos of the riding podcasts on YouTube. The channel is Equus Enlightened, but that link is in a link tree that's in the show notes. And until next time, happy riding. We are almost to spring here in Virginia, which I know makes all the Virginians happy. And longer days are here. So I hope you guys are really looking forward to a great season with your horses. Have fun. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Come Ride With Me. My goal is to demonstrate to riders that we don't have to do something every second of a ride. We don't have to do things a certain way or at a certain time. Just staying present with your horse and gathering non-judgmental information about how they are going is way more beneficial than overthinking and overworking. If you'd like to learn more about what I do at Equus Enlightened, you can find me at equisenlightened.net or on patreon.com/equisenlightened. You can also find me on social media as Equus Enlightened. I will put all the links in the show notes. And until next time, happy riding. Oh, before you go, please remember to rate, review, and share this pod so others can find it. I would love constructive criticism, but like my mom used to say, if you don't have anything really nice to say, there's no need to say it. Just ride on, my friends. Have a great week.